Get ready for certified USDA prime gun stuff on the GunGuyTV podcast.
Hi, this is Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support on GunGuyTV, for listening to the podcast, watching the videos, and if you support me on Patreon, thank you for that too. I really do appreciate it. Now, as usual, this podcast is 1 hour long, the first half an hour of which is syndicated on your favorite podcast player. You'll find them on, Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcast, which used to be called iTunes, and then Google Podcast, a whole bunch of other places. So I'm sure you can find it if you haven't already, and you can have it just downloaded to your phone or mobile device whenever you want. Listen to it on your car, on your way to work, or on your way home. That's what a lot of folks do. If you'd like to listen to the entire podcast, the second half of the podcast is on Patreon. Well, with this first part of the podcast, I wanted to talk with you about a concept that a lot of folks fall into, which I think is a dangerous concept, and that is the idea that bad things only happen to other people. They never happen to you or me, and that, of course, is a falsehood. By the way, I do want to let you know, too, I'm using one of our new headsets again today for the podcast because I'm actually in a noisy place. So hopefully you're not hearing the noise in the background. I'm not in the little quiet studio where I normally do this. So these headsets are great for this if I happen to be traveling or in a place that's noisy because they attenuate the sound around me. So hopefully it sounds good and you're not hearing the noisy background. All right, back to what I was talking about, which is the idea that bad things only happen to other people. Now, a lot of folks won't tell you that. It's not like they walk around thinking to themselves that bad things never happen to them or that bad things only happen to the other guy. And they generally won't articulate it and verbally and say, well, bad things only happen to other people. But it is nevertheless a mindset that permeates a lot of folks who live in safe places or what appear to be safe places. Arguably, the United States, for example, is safe most of the time for most people. There are bad neighborhoods and tough parts of town and so on, but if you're a middle-class person, for example, and you live in a nice middle-class or upper middle-class neighborhood, you tend to be safe most of the time. You're safe at the store when you go shopping. You're safe at the movie theater when you go watch the movies. You're safe if you go visit your kids at school. The kids are generally safe at school. You're generally safe at work. And we are generally safe at night when we go for a walk around the neighborhood or whatever we want to do. That's just the nature of living in a country like the United States. The vast majority of the time, we're safe. And then something bad happens, and we're shocked that something bad happened, and we can't imagine that it could possibly have happened to us. Well, that happens. Just this morning, I was reading a story before I went to the range to teach. I was teaching today, which, for me, I only teach a little bit now. I've retired from teaching for the most part, but I still teach the concealed carry course for the San Diego County Sheriff's Department. And I'm not the only instructor who does that. There's a lot of them. I just happen to be one. But in any case, this morning there was a news story about a family in Mexico that appears to have been murdered by a Mexican cartel. It's a group of folks who live in a community that's been down in Mexico for a long, long time. It's an offshoot of the Mormon church, apparently, and it was founded, it sounds like, a couple generations ago. There are a lot of folks who live there and have lived there for a long, long time. It's called La Mora, and it's a religious community in northern Mexico in the Sonora state, the state of Sonora. Apparently it was founded as an offshoot of the Mormon church, and then at some point or other split off from the Mormon church, and these folks lived there. Now, a lot of these folks who live there were born in Mexico, so many of them, because they were American citizens and are American citizens, now have dual citizenship because they're essentially American citizens who were born in the country of Mexico. From time to time, apparently, many of them travel back and forth between the United States and Mexico, and this is what was happening, I guess, the other day, or whether it was this morning. I didn't catch exactly when it happened in the article, but apparently they were on their way back to the United States when they were their convoy of SUVs came under attack, and many of them, 9 of them, were killed, and 6 of those apparently were children. Why they were attacked by the cartels, I don't know. I saw a later story that indicated that there apparently was a previous individual whom these folks were related to that some years back caused a little stir against the cartel, a kind of an anti-crime activist of sorts, and he was murdered by the cartel. But whether that has any connection to what happened now, I don't know. I do know this. As I read the story, first of all, it was heartbreaking to think about these young people who were killed, and certainly the children. And then you hear the stories of heroism of some of the kids getting away, or some of the kids being captured, and you read these stories. You don't know if they're accurate or not, because obviously these kinds of things unfold a little at a time, and sometimes the stories you get immediately you find out later are not entirely true. But one way or the other, it is a heartbreaking tale to think about these folks just essentially traveling down the road, minding their own business with no threat to anyone, and finding themselves being attacked by cartels. And as you know, if you watch the news at all, cartels are not kind, and they don't hold back. They attack you with a vengeance, and they will shoot you and your car full of holes, and apparently that is what happened. What got me is a comment by one of the family members that is in a story that appears on the Fox News website entitled "Mexican Cartel Massacre, 9 Americans, including 6 children from Mormon offshoot, murdered." Now, this gentleman, let's see, I have to think, see if I find his name, is last name Langford Jr. I didn't get the first name here, but apparently this is a person who was related to some of the people who were killed. And he spoke to Fox News, and he said the following. This is a quote. "It's just huge. It's just absolutely unimaginable. This is the absolute worst nightmare for our entire existence in Mexico. And we never thought it was possible." Unquote. I read that and I thought, wow, are you deceived? You live in the state of Sonora, Mexico, which has been in the news constantly as a result of cartel violence, and you think it's not possible that you or your family members might find yourself on the wrong end of violence. Now, obviously, they thought it wasn't possible because they were people of faith. Whether you are Mormon or believe the Mormon way or whatever, it doesn't matter. They were people of faith, and they were living in an area where apparently they were, by all reports, sounds like they had good relations with the local people and that they were generous to the local people, and they'd been there a long, long time. I suspect that because many of them were born there, that they spoke fluent Spanish, and so they were able to get along and survive there and not seem like foreigners. And indeed, they weren't foreigners. Many of them were dual citizenship folks that had citizenship in Mexico. So it would seem to me that they would blend in rather well and probably had a great relationship with the local people. And as a result, they probably never felt that they were in danger from the cartels, particularly if they were not picking fights with the cartels as a whole or trying in some way to protest against them. Now, we may find out later that that's what they were doing. I don't know. But at this point, it seems that it was not. Nevertheless, even in that situation where you're otherwise happy-go-lucky and doing your thing and living your life, it would seem to me that you understand you live in a dangerous place and that it is entirely possible that something bad could happen to you. I live in San Diego County, California. Now, I don't live in San Diego. I live in a suburb outside of San Diego, which is very quiet. Quite frankly, in my neighborhood, there is very little crime. The police are hardly ever here. We see the local police officers. Half of us know them. We see them at the local Starbucks around the corner where they stop and get gas. Stop and get coffee. I started to say we see them at the local gas station where they stop and get gas. Just to clarify that, I don't know what they're eating at Starbucks. You never know. They might get gas, but that's not the kind of gas I was talking about. When they're off duty, we see them at the local gas station getting gas in their car. We see them at Starbucks when they're on duty getting coffee. I just bumped into the mayor the other day at Starbucks. Very nice gentleman and very conservative gentleman. And we live in a quiet little town. Still, it's entirely possible that something horrible could happen to you even in a quiet little town like the one that I live in. And frankly, bad things have happened. They don't happen very often, but they do happen. And so if you bop through your life thinking that nothing bad can ever happen to you, well, guess what? It just might. And then all of a sudden, you're in trouble. Now, I don't live in Mexico. Mexico is not as safe a place to live, by and large, as the United States is. Now, if you're of Mexican descent or you're from Mexico and you're offended by that, get over it. It's just a fact. I go to Mexico on a regular basis. My dentist is in Mexico. I have friends in Tijuana, and my church helps out with some orphanages there and so on. I haven't been there in a few weeks, but I'm going to go back again here pretty soon for some more dental work because I've got an implant that was done, and I got to have it finished. So I'm fairly familiar with Mexico. I worked in Mexico for a couple of years, and I speak Spanish, marginally well. I'm certainly not fluent in Spanish, but I can get along. I could get a job, and I could do okay and fumble my way through it and improve my Spanish there, and I'd be just fine. So I can get along in Mexico, and I don't feel particularly unsafe there, but I'd be a liar if I said that I felt as safe in Mexico as I do in the United States. For crying out loud, when you walk across the border, at the Tijuana border crossing, one of the first things you see after your passport is stamped are Mexican soldiers standing there with assault rifles and decked out in their camouflage gear at the border. Now, that should tell you you've just walked into a dangerous spot right then and there, and it does. However, I still limited things I can do. I try to take steps to be safe because I realize I'm not in a safe place. And that's something that you would hope that these folks would have done. I hope they did do. Maybe they did, and it just didn't pan out. But the idea that we never thought this was possible, to me, is very, very foolish. And yet I do hear it from people on a regular basis. So let me tell you how I feel about that in more detail and what I do in my life to make sure that even though I don't think it would happen, I'm as prepared as I possibly can be in case something bad does happen. I'll tell you more about that in just a second. One of the things you can do to help out GunGuy TV, which costs you absolutely nothing, is to shop Amazon using our Amazon link. Now, if you buy things from Amazon anyway, you can use our Amazon link, and then when you buy things from Amazon, nothing will change for you. From your perspective, everything will be the same. The cost of the item you purchase is the same. The shipping is the same. Your Amazon Prime, if you have Amazon Prime, will work exactly the same way. The only difference is that by virtue of the fact that you went to Amazon through our link, Amazon will pay us a little bit of a marketing fee. That's all that happens. But it doesn't cost you anything. Now, if you'd like to do that, you can use our Amazon link by going to GunGuy.tv or GunGuyTV.com or GunGuyTV.net and clicking on the Amazon banner on the top. And then once you have the link there, you can bookmark it. And anytime you go to Amazon, just go to that bookmarked link and shop to your heart's content. It doesn't matter what you buy. You could buy gun-related stuff, or you could buy just household items, towels or toothpaste or toilet paper or whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever you buy from Amazon, they will pay us a small marketing fee. Doesn't sound like much, but it actually adds up. And it helps out quite a bit. So if you would please, shop Amazon using our Amazon link. You'll find it at the GunGuy TV website at GunGuy.tv.
Shooting straight and always right on target. This is the GunGuy TV podcast.
Many years ago, I discovered that the idea that they always happen to other people is a fallacy. Now, that doesn't mean that anything horrible has ever happened to me, really. I've had people try to hurt me. That's happened many times. After all, I did own a security company. We did explosives, narcotics detection with canine teams, and we did executive protection and that kind of stuff. And so when you're doing that kind of business, then every once in a while you end up in a tussle with somebody, or somebody's trying to hurt you in some fashion or other, and that has happened with me on a number of occasions in the past. In addition, I worked as a bail bondsman for a while, and that's a relatively safe job until you're forced to go get somebody who fails to appear. And if that person doesn't necessarily want to come along with you, you have an argument on your hands. Sometimes those people can be violent, and sometimes they can be violent in ways that could take your life. And I've experienced that. Not my life being taken, but I've experienced people being violent with me and trying to hurt me with weapons. So I've been in a position where I've had people try to harm me. Fortunately for me, I have never actually been harmed. In other words, I've never been shot. I've never been seriously injured while at work or anything along those lines. Now, I've been hurt in martial arts practices and broke my hand, and I've dislocated my shoulders, water skiing and stuff like that happened to a normal person. But as far as people hurting me, that's never happened to me. Likewise, I've never had a fire in my house. I've never had my house burned down. I've never had a car of mine burned down on the street. I've never been in a major traffic accident where I could have been killed. Those things just never happened to me. In those cases where I'm concerned, those have happened to other people. Likewise, I've never been seriously ill. I've been hospitalized a couple times for small things, but I've never had cancer or had any serious illness. But I shouldn't fool myself into thinking that those things cannot happen to me. They absolutely can. At some point or other, I will, if I live long enough, have some serious illness. At some point or other, something's going to kill old Joel, and the gun guy's not going to be here anymore. It's a magical thing that happens to each and every one of us, whether we like it or not, and that is called dying. We're all, at some point or other, going to pass away. Now, it's not something I'm not trying to be modeling here, and I'm not trying to be depressing. It's just a fact. At some point or other, we're all going to pass away. That's just the way it works. And if we try to deny that, well, we're not being very smart, I don't think. Likewise, at some point or other, we're going to experience tragedies in our lives. If we think we won't, then we're being foolish. If you live long enough, tragic things are going to happen to you, or they're going to happen to someone that you love. So the general idea that bad things always happen to other people, or as this guy expressed here, we never thought it was possible, is incredibly naive. Now, I say that with no intention to being insulting to this family. What they've gone through here is incredibly tragic. And I don't want to in any way appear to diminish what they have gone through and what they're going through. They've lost little children and wives and mothers and loved ones, and in the most horrific way. And I can't even come to grips with the idea of what they must be going through. So in no way do I want to come across as being flippant about it. I don't mean to sound that way. I think it just astounds me that they felt that this was not something that was possible, that this was unimaginable to them, given where they lived. It would be as if to say I live in a rotten neighborhood where I hear gunshots every night, but I cannot imagine that at one time or one place somebody might actually shoot at me. Well, that's a level of naivete that I don't think is particularly healthy. When I go to Mexico, I don't go there thinking that I'm not coming back, of course. I go there because I'm going to the dentist or I'm going to see a friend or whatever the case might be. But I still plan it out in such a way that I try to keep myself as safe as possible. For example, when I go to Mexico, I take the appropriate cab. I'll generally walk across. I don't generally drive in Mexico, although I have. Most times I'll walk across the border if I'm just going to someplace in Tijuana, and I'll take a cab. If I'm going to the dentist, for example, I know I'm to take the white cab with the green stripe because that's the cab company that my dentist has a deal with, and as a result, I know they know the dentist, I know they make extra money by taking me there, and that I have a better chance at least of being safe and getting to my dentist safely. I also know where the dentist is. I could drive there myself and have many times, and I could walk there if I had to. So if the cabbie starts taking a weird direction getting there, I already know I'm in trouble, and I would know that before I got there. So when I come back, I take the cab that the dentist has sitting waiting for me in the front of the dental office before I leave. So I know that cabbie is either going to take me to one border or the other one, whichever of the fronteras I want to take. And I can tell them the new one or the old one. They'll take me to the appropriate one, and I know how to get there. And I always have a nice conversation in Spanish with the driver along the way, and I always tip them a little extra. Now, not a whole lot extra because I'm not an incredibly wealthy man or whatever, but I want to make sure that they know I really appreciate them and that they take good care of me. And they do. Now, at the same time, if I'm going someplace else, I try to stay in the tourist areas. I try not to leave the tourist areas because I know that in the tourist areas of Tijuana, for example, they have Policía Turística. They have the tourist police. And the tourist police, their job is to make sure that the tourists are safe and happy because there's a lot of tourism in Tijuana and they need the money down there. So you have the beautiful little car that they drive, and they're very snappy and fine-looking uniform. They always look very nice, and their job is to present a nice presence for the police department in the city of Tijuana so that the tourists feel happy and safe about being there, because they don't want to have them harmed or robbed or whatever, because then the tourist dollars go back to the United States. I'm also mindful of the fact that a lot of the tourism is medical tourism. People go down there for the dentist or the doctor or whatever, because it costs less to go down there than it does someplace else. The dentists down there that I go to see are awesome, and they do a phenomenal job, and it costs me about 1/3 or less what it would cost to have the dental work done in California, and the quality is the same. Sometimes, honestly, it's a little better. And certainly the service is often better in Tijuana because they're very service-oriented, so I don't mind going down there. But again, if I'm in the tourist area, whether I'm shopping or whether I'm going to the dentist or whatever, I know I'm surrounded by the tourist police, La Policía Turística, and what they do is keep an eye on the tourists and make sure that they're safe and that they're not harmed while they're shopping. So that's pretty cool that they're there. I don't go to areas that are not tourist-friendly, because I don't want to, Tijuana is like any other city, and Mexico is like any other place. You can zig when you should have zagged, and you're in a terrible neighborhood. So I stay in the areas I know I have a better chance of being safe there. Now, there are some other things I do when I travel to a foreign country that give me an ability to at least fight back a little bit if I happen to find myself in a position where I'm now in trouble and I have to do something to try to take care of myself. I'll tell you what those things are in just a second. I mentioned earlier that one way you could help out with GunGuyTV is to shop our Amazon link, but I want to mention an affiliate relationship we also have with Second Call Defense. Now, Second Call Defense is a concealed carry coverage company. I'm not going to call them an insurance company because I don't think that's entirely accurate, because they do have insurance. But my understanding of Second Call Defense is it's more of a foundation which is fully funded, and then the insurance insures the foundation. So as a result, when you need help, the foundation fronts the money ahead of time for your bail, to bail you out of jail if necessary, for your criminal defense, for your defense against a lawsuit, for all these things that will happen to you potentially if you have a defensive shooting. They front the money for that, and then if you're defended successfully, the insurance then reimburses the foundation. That's my understanding of how it works. Some insurance companies don't front the money. They expect you to front the money and defend yourself, and then if you're successful in defending yourself at that point, then they will reimburse you through insurance. Well, I'm not exactly a millionaire, so I can't afford to shell out the money to defend myself. I need somebody else to do that, and that's what I'm subscribing to their service for. That's the way Second Call Defense works, and so that's why I chose them to protect me and my family, and that's why I'm suggesting that you check them out and consider them to protect you and yours. Now, if you choose to use Second Call Defense as your concealed carry coverage or your firearms defense coverage, I would suggest and ask you to use our affiliate link, because that way we get credit for your having done that. It doesn't cost you a dime. Again, it's like Amazon. They provide us with a little marketing fee if you go through our link to pay for Second Call Defense. Now, if you don't have our link or can't find it, you can go to our website at GunGuy.tv, and you can look for the Second Call Defense selection in the menu or the little banner ad for them. Either way, you'll get there. Or if you just want to go directly to Second Call Defense and you would be kind enough to let them know you heard about them from us, any of those things will work. So check out Second Call Defense. It's a great option for coverage in case you have to defend yourself with a firearm.
The opinions expressed by the Gun Guy are always right, unless they're wrong.
Obviously, the world is not a perfect place. If it was, I wouldn't need to defend myself at all, and I wouldn't need to carry a gun when I do carry a gun in the United States, which is most of the time. However, because it's not a perfect place, in other countries I can't carry a gun, so I have to see if I can figure out some other way to defend myself. Even within the United States, there are areas where I can't carry a gun because it's not legal for me to do so. I can't walk into a courthouse with a gun, for example. I can't walk into into a federal building with a gun. There's a lot of places I can't go with a gun, and indeed there are some states like New York or wherever where I can't carry a gun, but most of them I can. Well, if I cannot take a gun, I generally will take a knife because I practice Filipino martial arts, and that is a knife and stick type culture. So I'm fairly good at fighting with a knife. I'll take a knife with me. Well, yeah, unfortunately, there are places you can't take a knife. I can't carry a knife around in Mexico. It just doesn't go well, and so I don't do that. And there are places, buildings or whatever, federal buildings like that, you can't take a knife. Okay, well, if I can't take a knife, I'll take something else. So, for example, when I go to Mexico, I cannot take a gun, I cannot take a knife. I don't want to find myself inside a Mexican prison. I try to stay out of trouble and mind my own business and be polite to everyone. There are some things I can take. So, for example, I will take my cane. I have a fighting cane that looks like a regular cane, but it's made out of hardwood, and it's balanced in such a way that it's like a long eskrima stick. And so I know exactly how to use that. And while the crook on the cane can sometimes be a nuisance when you're using it like you would an eskrima stick, there are actually some wonderful techniques that you can use in fighting where that crook becomes a huge benefit. So I practice the use of the cane because that's a tool that I can take with me. And at my age, I'm in my 60s, I don't look like I don't look like a guy carrying a cane for no reason. People ask me why I got the cane. I tell them the truth. I do have a bum knee that bothers me from time to time. And honestly, when it's really bugging me a lot, there are times I actually take the cane because I really want to take the cane to take the pressure off my knee. So in answering that way, I'm telling the truth. Now, if you're 20 years old and you're in great physical shape, taking a cane with you probably is going to look a little odd. But if you're my age, it looks normal. Well, there you are. I can walk around Tijuana and go anywhere I want. I can get on an airplane, take my cane with me, because they'll let me get on the plane with it. Now, I also have a couple of really nice, high-quality cross metal pens. I don't know whether they're steel or aluminum or what they are, but I got one in my hand right now. They're silver. I really like these pens to write with. They're my favorite pens. I have two of them. And I take them with me when I go to foreign countries or when I go into a building where I can't take a weapon or whatever. I'll take one of my pens because metal. And it's a great stabby, pokey tool, not so terribly different than my knife, except it doesn't have an edge on it. But it's very good for stabbing because it's metal. And it's a pen. Well, like I said, I'm a guy in my 60s, so what's so weird about my having a cane and an ink pen? That's sort of normal for somebody my age, and I can take those things. Now, is that going to help me when somebody's shooting at me with a rifle or with a machine gun or with a handgun or from a technical vehicle or whatever? No, of course not. That's where my knowledge of cover and out are important. Everywhere I go, like I teach my students, I was telling my students today in class that the important things that you want to know where they are wherever you go are cover and out. Where can I get behind cover, something that will protect me from a bullet, and how do I get out of here? So if I find myself in a cartel shootout, I'm going to be moving to cover and then trying to get myself out of there if I possibly can, or hunkering down behind cover until it goes by and hoping I don't catch a round along the way. I mean, like I said, the world is not a perfect place. I, first of all, try not to put myself in a position where I'm of interest to criminals. I know I don't go to areas where I'm going to be of interest to criminals, and to the degree that I can, I want to stay in areas where it is a politically expedient thing to do for the city to provide police officers whose job it is to keep me safe because I'm a tourist and they want my tourist money. It's not because they want to keep me safe. They couldn't care about keeping me safe. They want the money, and so I get it. That's fine. If that's the case, then I want to stick around where those cops are because those are the cops that are there. They'll do a better job of keeping me safe because not that they're any less crooked probably than the other cops in Mexico because a lot of them are worse than the crooks, but at least they do have a job, and that is to keep the tourists safe. And from what I can see, they do a pretty good job of it. And then in case I get caught, somebody trying to mug me or whatever the case might be, I have my cane, I have my pen, and I train a lot. So, I haven't practiced a lot this last period of time, but I'm back into it again. And I do practice my martial arts a lot. So I know that even though I'm old, I might, if they take me for granted, I might just be able to defend myself and be able to get away. So there you are. So that's what I do when I go into Mexico. Now, would that have helped these folks who got killed with the family that was murdered? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe so. Perhaps for them, it would have been an exercise in planning their traveling a little differently, or understanding that because they live in a dangerous place, it is possible that they might be in the wrong place at the wrong time and they could get hurt, or that perhaps some cartel might mistakenly think that they are members of another cartel by virtue of the types of vehicles they drive, or the road that they were on, or the way that they traveled, or who knows what else. I don't know. I do know that for you and I, though, we're still around. And so for us, it's something to consider. What steps do we take? How do we think about where we go? Do we consider the fact that bad things could actually happen to us? And if so, what are we doing about it? And how are we ensuring that we've taken as many steps as possible to make sure that we can have the best possible chance of being safe? Now, in the United States, that means carrying a gun, I think, and I do, and then being very careful about your surroundings and being aware of your surroundings and all the other things I talked about in Mexico. Don't go to places that are dangerous and so on, but carry something that you can use to defend yourself. And as I've said many times, if you're in a state that won't let you carry a gun, or you're not old enough to be able to get a permit, or you're not old enough to carry one, but you're in a place where you can carry a knife, then carry a knife and learn how to use it. A knife is a very deadly and devastating tool in the hands of someone who knows how to use it. If you can't carry that, learn how to use a stick. Take a stick fighting class. Learn how to use a stick and carry a stick with you. You know, my cane is a stick, but guess what? So is my pin. And so you can use all kinds of different tools, common objects, to defend yourself if you train to learn how. Now, none of these things are perfect solutions. I do get it. But it is important to know that things can happen even when we think they can't. And things don't always happen to the other guy. Sometimes they happen to us. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about being prepared for those things, along with some information I got from a book called Emergency. This book could save your life, in the next part of the podcast. So if you're listening on Patreon, stick with me. If, on the other hand, you're listening on your favorite podcast player to the syndicated version of the podcast, I'm going to wrap it up here, and thank you very much for your time. If you'd like to hear the rest of the podcast, you can always do that on Patreon. Have a great week. Thank you again for listening, and wherever you go, whatever you do, please be safe.
You've been listening to the GunGuy TV podcast.